Soccer Talk podcast, the only podcast that focuses on watching soccer on TV, online and apps. In episode 107, we discuss NBC plans on launching a new streaming service next year, latest details on the rights to the International Champions Cup, beIN Sports comes out strong against illegal piracy, ESPN Plus and GolTV pick up more soccer TV rights, plus letters from you listeners in our mailbag section. My name is Christopher Harris, aka The Gaffer, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host Kartik Krishnaiyer, but not as always in India. So Kartik, you're in India now. How is it? Well, you just landed. Yeah. You've been there before many times, but how does it feel to be back in India?
I will get used to it, I guess, after we're done with this podcast. I just landed from Dubai, where the Asian Cup's been going on, and I've been in and around the tournament. Not in the tournament, I'm not playing, but around the tournament the last several days. Been there 4 days, so been quite interesting. And interesting that we're going to bring up beIN in today's pod, Chris, because being in UAE for a couple of days, I've heard complaints about beIN and Al Jazeera being removed from television in that country from some folks, particularly with the Asian Cup going on. Gives me a little bit of perspective about this whole fight we're going to talk about with the Saudis as well.
So let's start off by talking about the Asian Cup, Kartik, because it's been news worldwide in terms of what's been happening with Australia, India, all these countries, Iran, etc. But the reality is for most, well, actually for all of the soccer fans in the United States, it's not on television. It's not on television. It's not on streaming. In previous years, it was. I think it was on One World Sports. I think before that too. It's pretty much always been available, except this competition has not. So for a lot of us, we've been reading about the results. You've had the opportunity, Kartik, to watch some of the games. What for you has been the level of football been like, and what's the level of coverage like overseas on that tournament?
Level of coverage has been pretty intense in the Asian media, obviously, and in the Middle East. Pretty high in the English language press too. Well, not English language, in the British press. English language press in the U.S. It's non-existent, obviously. Australian press, it's very active. The level of the play has been a mixed bag. There have been some entertaining open matches, and then some just absolute duds. The Iran-Iraq match last night was a 0-0 draw. Iran is one of the favorites in this tournament, obviously, given how well they performed in the World Cup, how unfortunate they were not to go through. They won their group. They already had 6 points, and they played for a draw last night. I think the key thing I'm seeing right now in this tournament is it reminds me a lot of the CONCACAF Gold Cup, in that you have a lot of aspiring football nations, a lot of countries that have not necessarily performed well in these sorts of international tournaments before, but have made a new dedication to this, an increased tournament size. It's 24 teams, just like the Gold Cup's going to be 16 teams this go around. The Euros expanded to 24 teams. So it's a real mixed bag. Australia and Japan have both struggled to this point. Neither have played particularly well. I think Iran, until last night, he played very well. There have been just some other surprises in the tournament, but in general, the level hasn't been great. I expect it will pick up in the knockout stages. And we're going to talk a little bit about Spurs and Man United today. The fact that Son was able to stay with Spurs through the group stage, because South Korea was confident in progression, and they have progressed, says a lot about how seriously the top countries take the group stage. So Japan has not played well in this tournament, but my guess is that, and we saw how good Japan was during the World Cup, right? Obviously this past summer. My guess is that these countries, Japan, Iran, South Korea, and Australia, will turn it on in the knockout stage. Although I have to say, Australia, it's been a downward trajectory for a while now. So perhaps what we've seen in the group stage from them, the concerns we've seen in the group stage, are just very legitimate. Australia seems to mirror the United States a lot, Chris, when it comes down to it.
In many ways, both on the pitch and off the pitch, in terms of even the league structure, promotion, relegation. A lot of the same issues that we're dealing with here. So,
and similarly, the last thing I'll point out before we move on, similarly to the United States, Australia has a number of football fans, soccer fans that have just checked out on the domestic league for those reasons and are watching European football or watching the Premier League and Serie A, the two most popular leagues down there. I was talking to some folks about it in this week, and they said it's very similar. Comparing notes, Australia and the United States have some of the same issues in terms of their national team program, in terms of their domestic league, in terms of that then not satisfying the cravings for true football fans who then go seek football from Europe, club football from Europe. So, maybe that's something we explore further. If I'd been in Dubai longer, I might have explored this whole Australia-U.S. parallel a little more. I mean, it's something that has come to mind in the past, but now I'm really thinking about it after the last few days and a couple of the conversations I've had.
So the big match, Kartik, and this one you caught overseas on television, would have been Tottenham against Man United. Unfortunately, I missed the game. My daughters, so we had, I think, 3 games this past weekend, so it was kind of back-to-back travel soccer, and I did not get as much chance to watch live games as I normally would. I did catch the highlights on this one, but what was your impression of the game itself, but also in terms of the coverage that you saw overseas?
Yeah, so I actually arrived in India, basically watched games Saturday and Sunday, and then left for Dubai and the Asian Cup the last few days. So the last thing I saw before getting on the airplane and leaving India was the Spurs Man United match, and we had Peter Drury and Jim Beglin calling the match here. For the I think for the international audience, for most of the world, through Premier League Productions, and it was very different. And now maybe again, familiarity breeds contempt. I don't know, but we've talked about Arlo White on this podcast a lot, Chris. I don't want to beat up on him, but it had a very different. I felt like I was getting a proper call and a proper kind of just international call for this match with Peter Drury doing it, along with Jim Beglin, who was fantastic, right? But there was so much that happened in this match in terms of Spurs opportunities, Man United scoring the great counterattacking goal, etc. And so much of the match didn't need overemphasis or overexcitement or being overcalled. So I really appreciated listening to Peter Drury's call, and I'm curious if some of our listeners maybe can write in and let us know how Arlo White's call was on the game. But it reminded me of what we're missing for some big games in the U.S.
There was one game this weekend. I'm not sure which one it was, actually. It might have been Chelsea-Newcastle. And I tuned in late to this one and caught it kind of basically maybe, I don't know, 10th minute or something like that. And there was silence. And I thought, that's strange. I'm not used to hearing silence during a game, kind of a pause, kind of someone to actually take a pause, especially when Arlo White is commentating. And sure enough, within a couple of seconds, Arlo White kind of chimed in and kept on going about some stat or something. But I just thought for a second, it was refreshing to actually hear that kind of pause, hear the crowd noise, just enjoy what you're seeing in front of you on the TV screens. And it doesn't need to be painted out, every little detail. Radio, yes. And that's his background. His background is BBC Radio, Arlo White, and did a lot of cricket, did a lot of English football, British football. So his background, his MO, his experience really has been formative in those formative years on radio, and I think that's part of the why some of us have an issue with the transition. The other part of it is that it's a very American style. So it's a radio style, but it's also very American. And JP Dellacamera I love, but JP's got a similar style too. He's very talkative, tells stories, and JP comes from a radio background, and also, American soccer too. So he's, different type of style. But for Kartik, so from this past week though too, so that was the Spurs Man United game. There were many others that you saw, I'm sure, but was there one standout game, the one game that kind of rose to the top as your favorite game of the week?
It's got to be Leeds Derby, just because of the build-up with Spygate or whatever it's being called. And then I thought it was a really good game. Leeds came out; they could have had a penalty in the first minute, but Kmart Roof was fouled was flagged for offside. I think it was Kmart Roof that was fouled. But it was a really it just had this, because of the backdrop of Spygate, and then you obviously have Leeds top of the table, Derby chasing, they're in a playoff spot, maybe chasing automatic promotion. It had this real big game feel, but I think much of it was driven by the Spygate narrative, which hasn't let up. I mean, the whole time I was in Dubai, right? I was there for 4 days. I'm hearing about Bielsa all the time there. And so this certainly seems to have overtaken the Asian Cup, overtaken, I think, what's going on in the Premier League, overtaken just everything, the transfer market in the last few days in terms of people talking about it in conversations. And I don't know that we're going to have any finality on the issue. I just hope people can listen and appreciate that there are cultural differences. At the same time, when you come to a country, there are accepted practices for how football is conducted in certain countries, in England, for example. So I don't know, it's just incredible, this whole thing.
Yeah, so a couple of things here, Kartik. First up is, let me read out one of the questions, or one of the feedback from the listeners. This is from Tim Keane. He sent in an email, and he said, recently both of you have been on a championship love affair. And let me pause it right there. My favourite game of the week, Kartik, also was Leeds United against Derby. Again, we don't kind of check beforehand. We kind of just do the podcast live, so we don't know whose favorite is. But mine was also that for probably different reasons. But I'll get to that in a minute. So Tim Keane goes on to say, I can understand Christopher as he's a Swansea fan, and perhaps Kartik since his Bundesliga is on vacation. But if your game of the week is not Spurs against Man United, I will really believe you are biased against the Premier League. This game shows why it is the Premier League. And so, I didn't see the game live. I saw the highlights. From the highlights alone, there's incredible saves, drama, end-to-end. United had chances too. But Kartik, why would you say that the Leeds Derby match was more entertaining, or your game of the week, versus the Spurs Man United match?
I'm not sure about entertaining. The Premier League is the most entertaining sports league on the planet, but part of the reason it's so entertaining is there are a lot of bad giveaways in midfield, and there's a lot of bad defending in the league. And I saw a lot of bad defending from Manchester United in this match. Albeit, De Gea had some dramatic saves. A lot of the shots were right at him, let's be honest about it. But he made some very good saves. I thought it was a very good game. I probably would put it second on the list this week. But Leeds Derby had just this incredible drama around it, this backstory going on. Obviously, United, Spurs had the potential Pochettino jumping to United backstory, although Solskjaer keeps winning. He's going to be the manager next season for United, at least start the season as manager. But I just felt like this had more, this Leeds Derby game. I also have to say one other thing about this, and this is unfortunately an ongoing story. Now we're talking about late March at the earliest. Spurs home matches just don't have the atmosphere when they're being played at Wembley. So they could be playing the North London Derby against Arsenal. They could be top of the table facing Manchester United, which is the gold standard in English football, the biggest club in English football. United and Liverpool, the two biggest clubs. And it still doesn't feel right. If this match had been at White Hart Lane, if this match were at the new stadium, it might have felt better. I'm just over the Wembley thing, as are, I think, so many people. And Pochettino, if Pochettino jumps guys, it's because of the stadium situation. I just think that there's a lot more that we don't know that might come out about how Spurs spending is going to be restricted, how Spurs might have liability issues, legal issues that restrict spending. So keep an eye on this space.
So the reason for me picking Leeds against Derby as my match of the week was really the big reason for the attractiveness of the Championship and Leeds United is how open-ended the games are. And then that's the other thing too about these matches, especially when it's Leeds, but very much the Championship too, is that the positions on the pitch don't seem to be as rigid and as restrictive as they are in, say, the Premier League or Serie A. There seems to be a lot more movement, players switching positions, being out of position, and it ends up being a more fluid game. It's also more feisty too, because the refs aren't as strict and they're letting things go a little bit longer. So the refereeing, you could argue, is not as good, but actually it adds to some extra spice to the games. And at the end of the day, it is more entertaining. I feel, and I felt this way for the last couple of months. The other thing Kartik out of this game too was Jack Clark, and this guy is so good. If you haven't had a chance to watch him, listeners, definitely check out one of these Leeds United matches too. He's been rated as one of the top 10 young youth players in England, but he's so good. He's such a breath of fresh air, playing on the right wing, 18 years old. He's come through the Leeds Academy, and oftentimes he's come on as a substitute, and I think it's his first start for Leeds United. And then other than David Brooks at Bournemouth, right now, Jack Clark is one of my favourite players to watch in football worldwide. Just a really entertaining, fantastic footballer, dribbler, kind of old school, great crosser of the ball, and has a shot on him too. So in many ways too, and we talked about this last week, is that the Championship is almost like going back in time to some of the things we loved about the Premier League so much. And it wasn't the most entertaining game in terms of Derby. I thought Derby could have at least given Leeds a bit of an extra push, and kind of when Leeds went 2-0 up, I think it felt pretty safe that they would go on to win this match. But then with Spygate, who knows, Kartik? I mean, maybe Frank Lampard thought, okay, hey, they know everything, every trick in the book in terms of how we're setting up, and we've got an FA Cup game against Southampton, replay, so maybe we save our energy for that one, which they went on to beat Southampton and knock them out of the third round.
Yeah, although Lampard was still carrying on about Bielsa in the pre-match and post-match in that FA Cup replay. So but that's the other thing though too, Kartik. I mean, one of the reasons we love the Premier League so much is that off-the-pitch drama, that soap opera side of things. And I mean, this is one of the biggest stories of the year in terms of Spygate, with Bielsa admitting that he's had people, his staff have gone ahead and spied on training sessions for every single club in the Championship. Gone into the training sessions or kind of been on the outskirts with binoculars or however they've been doing it, but spying on the training sessions. My take on it, Kartik, is that there's nothing wrong with it in terms of it's poor sportsmanship, but there's nothing legally wrong with it. There's no rule that says you shouldn't be spying on your other team's training sessions. But even on a kind of a travel team perspective, if we saw, kind of an opposition coach coming to one of our training sessions and watching our girls or our boys play, they would get a little bit feisty. We'd be like, hey, get out of here. You don't belong here. But at the end of the day, there's no rule against it. So, why not? I think, Kartik, anything else from this past week you want to point out? Anything else that jumped out at you? Yeah, let me concur with you on Jack Clark. What a phenomenal player, and what a joy he's been to watch, particularly over this festive period. So Everton-Bournemouth was kind of interesting just to watch it. Again, I was in India that morning before I left for Dubai. It was John Champion and David Pruden on the call, who I think you probably got in the States also.
Yeah.
But then our Premier League studio was Steve Bauer, and they had Teddy Sheringham, who obviously has played for both Spurs and Man United, connected with both clubs, and Tim Sherwood in the studio, who's very partial to Spurs, of course. And it was an interesting discussion, because I think what I'm so used to from NBC now is that you get this kind of objective discussion without anyone connected to clubs, right, in the studio. And obviously Steve Bauer is connected to Manchester United also, but he never showed that in his time with NBC. Didn't really show it in this studio either. But then, Sheringham was brought in for kind of, what's the Man United perspective? He played with Solskjaer. You and him scored the two most famous goals in club history, or recent club history, obviously, in '99. And then Sherwood with the Spurs perspective. And it was different to see that dynamic at halftime of a match, and then in the pregame and the build-up, because halftime of the Bournemouth-Everton match was not about that match. It was about Spurs. And United coming up after that, and then in the build-up, in the pregame show to Spurs United, that it was very much about engaging guys who are partial to one of the clubs that are playing. So that's kind of different than how we're doing things at NBC.
Yeah, which can work pretty well at times. We've seen this in the past before too, where players or former players are a little bit too close to the club and don't want to criticize. Or then you get someone like Paul Scholes, who obviously very close to the club, but doesn't mind. Talking about Jose and talking about how bad he was or how they set up. So it can work and it can't work depending on the individual. So it sounds like, Kartik, then, in terms of the coverage that you were seeing with Steve Bauer presenting, that would have been from the Premier League Productions, so kind of the worldwide feed, which is usually a very good studio set. So they're taping it or doing it live in London and then beaming it across the world. And from the coverage I've seen from Premier League Productions, it's good. It's they have reporters in the stadiums. They have reporters in the press conferences. And for those broadcasters that may not have the talent or may not have the capabilities or resources to have their own production, oftentimes it's better just to have, say, Premier League Productions, just use the world feed for, the pre-match, halftime, and post-match. And it's a lot easier to deal with. NBC obviously have gone with their own talent and their own crew and their own identity, which is different than Premier League Productions. But interesting decision there, and it's interesting that you were able to catch that on your travels. All right, Kartik, let's move on to TV streaming news.
Yeah, so speaking of NBC, they're finally jumping into the streaming wars, announcing a new service to compete with Netflix and Amazon Prime and all these other streaming services. Launching in 2020, the new NBC Streaming Product is an ad-supported service available for free to its paid TV subscribers in the U.S. It'll be available for a fee without ads, whether you're a paid TV subscriber or not. Comcast, which owns NBC, will provide the streaming service to their 52 million global subscribers, potentially making it the largest of the new streaming services when it launches next year. For us, the reality is too soon to know what kind of impact this will have on NBC's coverage of the Premier League. It's possible it could end up with no live coverage on the streaming service, making it kind of useless for people like us, or maybe the stuff we have on Gold now gets folded into it. Who knows? But it's something that we definitely need to keep an eye on over the next 12 months.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because they actually have two models with this. As you mentioned, Kartik, they have it's going to be free for pay TV subscribers. So if you subscribe to, Comcast or DirecTV or whichever channel, as long as you have a deal with NBC, you would get that for free. But for cord cutters, you could go ahead and actually watch it or subscribe to that service for a fee. We're not sure how much that fee will be. Or if you want to go ahead and get it without the commercials, you would, and you're subscribed to, say, DirecTV or Uverse or Comcast, whatever it is, you could pay a little bit extra to have it without ads. So it's interesting in terms of the developments that what NBC is thinking of doing here. It makes sense to, Kartik, with you mentioning about Comcast, which owns NBC, is that if they offer this streaming app for free to all of their Comcast subscribers, 52 million people globally would have this streaming service, making it the number one. But at the end of the day, we don't know whether or not it's going to be live programming as well as on demand. On demand for sure, but the live question is the big one. And if it is live, then does that then get rid of NBC Sports Gold, or do you need NBC Sports Gold plus this streaming service in order to get access to everything? We'll have to wait and see. And we probably won't know until probably the summer or fall of 2019 once more information is released about this. So that's one to watch. Now, talking about TV and streaming, we've got some details about some of the rights that are out there. So ESPN Plus has picked up the rights to the Scottish FA Cup, which begins Friday with Cowdenbeath against Rangers. Also, GolTV has picked up the rights to the Dutch KNVB Cup, which will be televised next week in the US. Previously, beIN Sports Connect had those rights, but so GolTV you can get through Fubo if you don't have it through your cable or satellite TV provider. The other news is that International Champions Cup rights ended in August when the tournament ended. And according to my sources, ESPN is very close to renewing those rights. So it looks like International Champions Cup for this summer and probably for the next couple of years will probably return to ESPN. But until that deal is done, we won't know for sure. And once the deal's done, we'll go ahead and announce it on this podcast and I'm sure on the website too. Now, Kartik, some big news from the Middle East and overseas, which has an impact on the United States, but is really felt more so in the Middle East.
And we're taping this, ironically enough, just as Saudi Arabia and Qatar are kicking off in the Asian Cup. So, real irony about this, and I've just, as I said at the outset, just landed back from Dubai and the Asian Cup. So, very much on my mind, this beIN story. So, the beIN Media Group has launched a tell-all website that features a mountain of evidence against BQUTQ, the Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, BOutQ.
beOutQ, the Saudi Arabia-based pirate TV channel. The website includes materials where beOutQ is based, who is behind it, and who sets out all the detail of all the commercial rights that have been stolen from organizations across the world, sportive entertainment, since beOutQ first appeared. Through the 10 encrypted channels, beOutQ illegally broadcasts live sport every day, stealing content from every sports rights holder in the world, including FIFA, UEFA, Premier League, La Liga, other football leagues, NFL, the NBA, World Tennis, etc., Formula One, etc. A significant number of legal cases have been directed and brought against Saudi Arabia for backing beOutQ. In December, a WTO panel has been established to adjudicate on the beOutQ case. In October, beIN commenced an international investment arbitration claiming over $1 billion in damages against the kingdom on the basis of beOutQ. And recently, FIFA, the AFC, and other sports rights holders have disclosed that they will be launching legal action in Saudi Arabia very shortly. So, Chris, before you get to your thoughts on this, I just lived this the last few days. There was, first off, beIN and Al Jazeera have been taken off of most of the systems in UAE, where Dubai is, who is hosting the Asian Cup. Qatar, because there's this economic blockade led by the Saudis and UAE against Qatar, the Qatari national team had to fly to Kuwait and then take another plane, which was not registered to their country, from Kuwait to UAE to arrive. And as I said, they just kicked off with Saudi Arabia as we're taping this program. Once everybody listens to it, they'll know the result. But it's a really heated, obviously, match because of all of this and the relationship between those two countries. Now, what I heard the last few days was a lot of complaints about beIN being taken off of televisions in UAE. And there was, it was incredible. Just Dubai is an incredible city. It's an incredible place. It's an incredibly open place. And there seems to be a lot of freedom and just a very Western feel. This was the one pushback I got about, how wonderful Dubai is and how wonderful UAE is as a host of its tournaments, is the restrictions on beIN in that country. And there are people who are pirating streams of beIN within the UAE to show football matches that you're not able to get if you don't have beIN. So this thing is just got many dimensions to it. And as I said, I just lived it the last few days. It's a much more pertinent story to me now than it would have been if this had happened a week ago.
Yeah, there's definitely no love lost between Saudi Arabia and Qatar on this one, Kartik. And it is really, it starts off as a political kind of disagreement, really. It's more about politics, but has evolved into this fight over Saudi Arabia, streaming a lot of these broadcasts illegally, and then thus by doing so is actually hurting beIN Sports, which is based in Qatar, which is a Qatar company. So it's really damaging beIN Sports, and no wonder why beIN Sports has come out pretty strong and pretty heavily about this. At the end of the day, too, even for us in the United States, some of the illegal streams are beOutQ streams. So even though you might be based in New York, Los Angeles, Miami, wherever you are, and you're watching an illegal stream, of a game. Maybe it's La Liga, maybe it's the Premier League. It could be many different games. beIN Sports globally has rights to pretty much all the major soccer leagues. It could be a BOutQ illegal stream, which is coming from Saudi Arabia. So it does get very political. And my thoughts to Kartik on this was that beIN Sports was very upset at Serie A this week because Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, hosted the Italiana Supercoppa between Juventus and AC Milan. At the same time that beIN Sports and other broadcasters are paying millions of dollars every year to Serie A for the right to show the league on television. I mean, globally, beIN Sports shows Serie A in many different countries, not the US, but many different countries. At the same time that they're paying Serie A for it, the Italian league turns around and is collecting money from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, who are promoting piracy and kind of almost giving almost an endorsement to Saudi Arabia. So it's a bad look for Serie A. It's not good because the Italian league should be coming down heavy on illegal streaming and supporting those who are fighting against illegal streaming. But what a mess, Kartik! This is a big mess. I don't see this one being resolved for anytime soon, unless the authorities come down hard on Saudi Arabia, which it takes time. It takes time for that.
And Serie A has gotten enough of a black eye with having the match in the first place after the Khashoggi killing, and a lot of controversy, a lot of anger in Italy that I had heard about a month ago when Serie A made the decision to go ahead and still play the match in Saudi Arabia. The assumption was that they would move the match, or they would find a way out of it after that brouhaha. Again, that's a political situation like this is. But when you're talking about nations like Saudi Arabia and Qatar, you can't escape the politics. We can't escape the politics with the World Cup bid from Qatar. So, and that was that's another little aspect of all of this, Chris, that came up the last few days during the Asian Cup. Quick digression. There seems to be, even though UAE and Qatar are at odds, the people that I talk to in Dubai seem to have a certain degree of pride in that the World Cup is in that region in 2022, and they're just assuming that this political situation will get straightened out by then. But it's been almost 2 years now of this blockade against Qatar, and it doesn't show any signs of abating. But and that World Cup is now, only 2.5 years away. So we'll see.
Yeah, well, we'll have to wait and see too, Kartik, because FIFA has said that if Qatar wants to go ahead and host the World Cup in 2022 with 48 teams, that FIFA is okay with that. It's up to Qatar. Can Qatar actually manage that? And Qatar could reach out to UAE, could reach out to some other countries to figure out if there's a deal that can be done to host some of these matches in the Middle East to have 48 teams competing. That's quite a possibility. All right, Kartik. Yeah, just two more news items real fast. The next one up is that industry analysts believe that it'll soon be becoming before consumers will have the option to bundle several different streaming services onto one bill. Now, it could be one fee for Netflix, Amazon, and Hulu. That could be the possibility. This is a quote from a industry analyst. It says, bundling is likely on the horizon as consumers may eventually have streaming platform fatigue and will not want to subscribe to dozens of services separately. Consumers can already get premium cable platforms as add-ons through Hulu and Amazon. So bundling has already started. So yeah, Amazon Prime, if you subscribe to that and you get the video, you can add on Showtime, you can add on HBO to that. And that's something too, Kartik, that we've seen is, I think the other day I was trying to figure out how many streaming services I subscribed to for soccer, well, and for the entertainment too, but I think it's probably about 6 or 7. If I could actually pay one bill to have all of those, I guess in theory it's better, but my thing is I'd rather pick and choose what I want, so I can unsubscribe from one particular service rather than having to unsubscribe from everything. Or if I'm able to unsubscribe from different services from one bill, I don't know. I'd rather pick and choose what I want. I'm not the majority. I'm not the mainstream, but for the mainstream, this could be very, very interesting. Could be actually good for them. What do you think, Kartik?
Yeah, I think it could be very good for the mainstream. But one of the things that has been a complaint about the cable industry and this is because of Congress and the way they regulate the cable and satellite industries, that you haven't been able to do the a la carte cable thing, right? You're basically locked into tiers and plans that the cable companies themselves determine. One of the beautiful things about streaming is you've been able to mix and match, right? But I have the same issue where I have 6 or 7 different things I'm paying for a month, and I'm not even sure how many things I'm paying for a month. It's probably like 6 or 7. So in theory, it could be useful, but like you, I'm thinking we might be in a position where if they take away the a la carte kind of mix and match features, or at least reduce that, it may not be as advantageous for people like you and me, and a lot of people as it sounds.
Yeah, and the bundling though too, it goes back to cable. It goes back to probably a same price point of what we were paying on cable is what a bundled streaming service would be. So it's almost like moving, you mean kind of all the chips and marbles from one side to the other. And this is really kind of more of a cable driven push rather than, I think, a streaming push. This is cable companies saying, okay, how can we simplify this? How can we make sure we're not left out in terms of, everyone's subscribing to Amazon Prime? Maybe we give the option to add on HBO and Showtime and these other channels. It will be interesting to see how this one unfolds. But so depending on how you feel, you might feel one way or the other. Let us know in the feedback listener mailbag section. Kartik, one more news item before we move on.
Yeah, so La Liga's second, third, and fourth divisions will now stream select games for free on YouTube around the world. However, the deal does not include the United States. Select games from Spain's Segunda division will be available on beIN Sports Connect. Also, by the way, does not include Spain in terms of the Segunda division. Those matches will not be available on YouTube in Spain. But for much of the world, you will now have access to Spain's second, third, and fourth divisions and get to see some quality football there for free.
Yeah. Oviedo, Real Zaragoza. There's a few clubs that would definitely be interesting to watch there.
Malaga.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, TV ratings. Kartik, the Spurs-Man United match that was, you talked about, you saw it overseas, we talked about it, we saw it over here, well, the highlights. It's the most watched EPL game in more than a year. It's the largest number since the Manchester Derby in December 2017. The number of this one was 1.17 million people tuned in to watch it on NBC, SN, and Telemundo. Also, 1 million plus watched Chelsea against Newcastle on NBC on Saturday. And also over 1 million people watched Cruz Azul against Chivas on Univision and Univision Deportes Network this past weekend. So 3 matches over 1 million, but the big one of the week was Spurs Man United. All right, Kartik, let's move on to listener mailbag. David Roberts says, regarding your paywall discussion, I think more of the frustration has to do with sticker shock syndrome. We're paying for so many different services as opposed to one in a lump sum. Even though it's probably the same amount of dollars, it's fragmented now and feel like it's more. And actually, this goes back right to what we talked about in the news segment about bundling. In David's case, that it sounds like he would prefer to have one bill, all the things kind of together in one package, and paying that. And having it be fragmented and paying each one separately feels like for some people they're paying more. Ritik says, hi guys, as a DC United fan, I am outraged by the club's decision to broadcast games on a streaming service that myself and many other soccer fans have never heard of until last week. I get that streaming is the future, but surely they would have picked a more reliable and accessible service that shows MLS and many other soccer leagues like ESPN+. I don't think DC United fans would have been opposed if Flow Sports was not a niche player in the soccer world, and the price point of $9 per month for non-season ticket holders is ridiculous in my opinion. It also comes at a time when the club is attracting more casual fans because of Rooney and success on the pitch, and I honestly don't think them and even some diehards will be willing to pay for Flow Sports. We should be grateful that we have Wayne Rooney because he is a reason why we are among the top 5 teams with the most games on national television. It would have been a complete disaster if the club made this move without Rooney in the squad. Now, Kartik, you probably missed it this week, but I think Don Garber had some comments about the deal with Flow Sports. And essentially his spin on it was that MLS has people that stream soccer are kind of really younger fans, whether it's 20-somethings. My argument to that, too, is that the 20-somethings soccer fans, a lot of them are streaming illegally. So this doesn't really kind of address that. It seemed to be kind of more of a Don Garber agreeing with this deal, thinking, okay, it's a good thing, when I think most DC United fans, there's probably very few that think this is a good idea. It's hard to spin this one and be positive, but Don Garber accomplished it.
Which he's good at.
Yeah. Hernan Justo says, when you get the TV ratings for soccer games, those who DVR the games and watch later, are they counted as viewers? Because personally, I don't know anyone that watches games live. So, Hernan, good question. I did some research on this one just to check. And Nielsen does have what they call live plus same-day audience ratings, which includes people who watch the programming on DVR that same day. And it also includes the total average that includes the number of people who watched it live. So if you are watching games live, great. I think many of us are. But if you are watching them DVR, usually if it's that same day, those do count in the TV ratings. So if you have any questions for us, any feedback, advice, want to disagree with us or agree with us, you name it, let us know. You can always reach us via email through web at worldsoccertalk.com, as well as facebook.com/worldsoccertalk, and on Twitter at worldsoccertalk. Plus, of course, you can always post your comments on worldsoccertalk.com. So, Kartik, what's your travel plans looking for the rest of the week, and when will you be back in the US?
I'll be in India the rest of the week, and I'll be back in the US the following week.
All right, so probably next podcast you'll be in India too then?
Correct, yes.
All right, looking forward to it. So everyone, thank you for listening. You can get a new episode of the World Soccer Talk podcast every Thursday. Every episode is released on SoundCloud, YouTube, Stitcher, iTunes, TuneIn, Audio Boom, and worldsoccertalk.com. And if you like the show, share it with your friends and on social media, and give us a review on iTunes. We'd greatly appreciate it. And Kartik, with a lot of football this weekend from around the world, what should they do?
Enjoy your football.